Welcome to the Field Notes podcast, presented by Seaworthy Functional Medicine. Seaworthy exists to help you overcome your complex health challenges so you can be fully vital. Now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Downey.
What do we need to know about how our experience is embodied, and specifically, how can we act on that for ours and others' benefit? Today, we are so privileged to be joined by Veronique Ory. Veronique, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Rob. So happy to be here.
So Veronique is a yoga instructor and author and expert, but there's this whole and because many of my heroes are yoga teachers and instructors, there's that dimension. But today there's an extra dimension, and maybe you'll share with us that this is a dimension of yoga, but I didn't realize that, or a logical extension of yoga, or maybe like me, you're dual trained, where I've got my family medicine toolkit and then my functional medicine toolkit, and the two work together better than each one alone. But we're going to be talking today then about just how um, exper our experiences in the body, embodiment is then a path forward, and just some amazing connections between functional medicine and embodiment, our nervous system, our fascia, emotional metabolism. And I mean, this is coming up a lot now. Gabor mate. I mean, lots of my friend's a Zen Buddhist. He's talking about this all the time. All experiences embodied, all emotions embodied. So how should we land on this concept? Should we start with your kind of comic? Are you okay with starting with your comic book hero origin story? Like why this matters to you? Is that a logical first step?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's so much in the ether on intergenerational trauma and our holding on to emotional stress or something that we're not willing to let go of. So it could be a job change or a relationship change or something from our family of origin that we're still grappling with in some regard, right? And so when I've moved through my family of origin story through, sort of like the archetype of what one does when they feel like they don't get enough love in their childhood. I went into theater and I just really craved to be seen, to be celebrated. And I think, when you look at, any toddler, any child, like really like probably like pre-puberty kind of age, like there's a celebration around like really small milestones, right? It's like you put the square shape object into the square hole and like the whole family applauds, like it's like the most miraculous thing that you've done. And then I think what ends up happening is like the applause sort of wanes, and then we feel like, wait a second, I'm still wanting to be celebrated. And so there's actually a lot around how we can better be with our children to kind of like get ahead of this. But in this present adult state of how we've grown up, I've been really in the conversation of like deep acceptance and surrender. And I feel like even if you grow up in sort of a trauma-filled home, or if you have that in your marriage or your partnership, there's a certain sense of safety because it's known, right? That's talked a lot about in psychology and spirituality and even science, studying the neural pathways of how we function. And so as we start to unpack this, there's then a space of recognizing that there's something wrong or we're like seeking to fix. And that's kind of like a human bias where we're kind of like looking for where the fixes are. Oh, like this isn't as optimal, or we see someone doing something over here, and then we get into this like comparison sort of, I talk about comparison, judgment, and expectations as like this trifecta of complete harm that we continually self-induce. And so some of the ways that I've been moving through that has certainly been through theater. So I had what I would call sort of like active therapy, but I didn't know that it was that at the time, where I had these cathartic releases through other characters, where I would rage and I would bawl my eyes out, and it would be very physical because I loved, dark comedies and dramas and a lot of like really like messed up family and like relationship dynamics, and just like moving through that in a way that was like me but separate of me. And so as time went on and you start to parse out like, okay, why am I able to access these emotions? And a lot of us, right, we block that because we're told by, maybe our parents or our mentors or our teachers, like, okay, you're being like a little bit too much right now. However, as I know that and many of your listeners understand, is no emotion is inherently bad, but it's how it is, it's that it's expressed that creates the harm. And usually what we do is we kind of like put the emotions under the rug, so to speak, and then all of a sudden we have this big like molehill that we trip over, and then like the smallest thing happens and then we like erupt into a rage or like a major meltdown. And I've definitely moved through, I've been sort of massaging my my trigger response as the years have gone on. And so I've been thinking about the hold in which that one wants to have on what has happened, and then also how masterful we are in our imagination and our storytelling that actually sort of takes almost like a kaleidoscope version of what actually happened. And we're less and less sure whether it's fact or we're inserting our opinion and our vantage point on something. And so I've been very much in this perspective perception meditation of, is that truth or is that my opinion? Am I labeling it as such? And so I'm holding on to like this indignant like righteousness of like, I was wronged, and so what ends up happening in those circumstances is I have, and I know many people have, it's like you want this person to come to you with so much kindness and remorse and give this like really heartfelt apology and like, state their wrongdoings, and then we would have this perfect closure, right? But oftentimes, they didn't get that script. They're not aware that they're in your play, right? Like you're the hero or the heroine of your own story. And so what ends up happening, and I think this is such a great gateway into the letting go of the held things, is, was talked a lot in the forgiveness journey, is like you're not forgiving to condone, but rather so that it doesn't have sort of like a hijack cancer in your body, right? And so I think about that with trauma and like these emotional holdings, or wanting things to have remained a certain way or wishing something was different. And so as we move through that as adults, as we continue to delve into the work, and I think this is such an important distinction as we're moving through all these different modalities, right? It's like, I just had a client asking me like, okay, is it true that women hold their emotions in their hips and men hold their emotions in their shoulders? And I said, yeah, that is an archetypal truth. And he said, what if you don't know what the trauma is? And so a lot of the time that's the case, right? And what I think is so important to highlight there is we've moved through what we moved through in a way that we knew at the time was a protective mechanism. And oftentimes it's this holding because that's like that sense of safety, almost like it's like a security blanket. And so what the process of healing is actually feeling safe enough to let go of the grasp of it. And it's like a mind quandary, right? Because it's like, well, why would you want to hold on to trauma? And it's you could cognitively know that you want to release it, but I think there's different layers of knowing. There's the cognitive knowing, and then there's the heart knowing. And then I think there's this other layer of like on a cellular level, like this full body, mind, spirit knowing of I'm releasing this. Like for me, for all of us, right? Because
Mhm.
we can't help but feel that as a collective. And we can feel that palpably, right? When there's like something happening in the ether, like you could look around and be like, okay, I have a roof over my head, I have food in my belly, like in a lot of ways, like I am safe, I am loved, I belong. And yet there's like this discord. And so what I think is so important about being in this conversation as a collective is when we each do that, then that we can experience this powerful collective healing. And that's why this conversation is so important, that it's not just one person at a time, but it really is like it's like we're all kind of like a part of this like amoeba experience, and we're all feeling into that as a collective water mostly
Mhm.
filled
Mhm.
being.
Mm. Mm. So many beautiful insights there. Thank you. I hope anybody, a lot of the patients that I see now, and just a lot of folks, verbally or inverbally, are sort of invoking, how can I make a difference? I think particularly people, well, anyone compassionate or anyone with an open heart, but particularly empaths, which is statistically only 1 in 5, I guess. But just folks saying, I want to make a difference.
Hmm.
I really think today's conversation is a neat invitation. I think this is a really powerful way to make a difference. I often feel lucky because it's my job as a physician. I have kind of an old school take on it, that it's the lineage of healers. And I think over thousands of years, healers were, head, heart, gut connected to people in their communities. And a lot of the time, there was nothing they could do. But actually, what they did was connect, which is therapeutic, from a place of compassion and kindness and etc. And so much of my practice then is the physiologic manifestations of trauma and overwhelm. And the majority of my patients that don't get better, that's where they're stuck. And so now I realize the degree to which I can release this for myself empowers me to help them find and release it. And a lot of this season, just by happenstance of the Field Notes podcast, has been talking with folks sort of coming into this space through different doors that you just invoked. Um, the way you invoked it was so elegant and succinct. I'm kind of blown away. So sometimes as the host, I have to say, wow, that's so cool what I just heard, right? I wish I was in the audience rather than the host, just because I want to just stop and savor it. Um, you did talk about these things are in our body. I think we just need to take that as a given. That's the science now, that's the energetic observation. I mean, healers, yogis, scientists, physiologists, uh, Bessel van der Kolk with The Body Keeps the Score, starting with PTSD and Vietnam veterans. I mean, basically, the data's in our fascia, our cells. Uh, so I don't know that we're serving our audience to go too far. Do you think there's any part of the science? Sometimes people in Western industrialized cultures have to have a little bit of why we do that. You talked about it as being protective. I resonate with that. But
Hmm.
before we talk in what to do about it, anything more people need to know about why we store this for safety, or does it flash and print in our consciousness as overwhelm, flash and print into our tissues, and we're just sort of carrying it, but we don't know it?
Hmm. Yeah, this is so layered, and depending on your belief system, I believe that we carry through the generations and also through lifetimes, and and that we are seeking a body to carry out our life's purpose. And not to say that we chose the trauma. Certainly that's not it. I think there's so much in rewriting the story around it that is so therapeutic. And I think like generations are born with another opportunity to rewrite the story. Not like I'm making things up and I'm spiritually bypassing and I'm ignoring the things. That's not it. It's more like I could tell the story of my grandmother and her mother being sent to take a shower during the Holocaust and how they were set to be killed. And on that day, the showers were broken and their lives were spared. I could tell the story about my grandfather being starved and how the acids ate away at his stomach, and he had to have a significant part of his stomach removed because the acids ate away at the lining. And what was modeled to me is when they immigrated to Montreal, they never told the story in the victim space at all. It was, these are the facts, these are the things that happened. And then we took your father, who was 10 years old, and we got on a boat with nothing but the clothes on our back, and we immigrated to Montreal to have a better life.
Mm.
And here we are, we gather around the table and we have fresh bread with butter and honey, and we tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of connection. And so I think about that in terms of feeling into the energy of that, right? So there's like a lot in the ether of like, I am enough, I am worthy, as if it's something that we have to prove. And yet it is. By like so many of us through our lineage, we're actually sent to be killed. And it's still happening today. And so, they say like, if you're not angry and depressed, you're not paying attention. There's a lot to be angry and depressed about. However, right, like, do we want to eat the bread with butter and honey, like in this rage? Or can we just be so grateful that through that, there's so much fortitude and resilience, and like soften into forgiveness, not to condone, but if we assume the best in one another, right, that we're all operating from a space where, given the information that we have, right, like we're all sort of brainwashed or like in a trance, right? Like whether you decide like, oh, like Yankees are my team, like why do you think that is? It's probably like where you grew up, like your parents told you, you know what I mean? Like you could have these like isolated thoughts, and certainly I believe we all have our autonomy and agency to change our minds, certainly. But oftentimes we don't, like of our like core belief system. And so it's so important when we look at our early imprinting. So I think of like before puberty, like all of these like little messages, and we're like our receptors are like on high alert, right? And what you were saying, it's like then we like store that in the body, right? It's like this is good, this is bad, this is danger, this is safe, and we just kind of like are in this like sorting. We might not be in our heads like thinking that literally like to each input. However, there's all of that happening, like, oh, there's a tree and there's leaves, and we're like labeling things all the time. And so I think when I've been moving through this conversation of what it is that we hold and the why, it's like, oh, it's because it's what's known, right? If we knew a different way, we would do that. And if we assume that we do our best given what is given to us, what we're taught, and then like through the lineages, This is why, it's so important to give grace in these instances, because then we can soften the edges around like the othering, like
Mm-hmm.
this person's a villain in my story, or these people over here are no good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah.
right?
Well, I'd want to do two things at this juncture. One is just acknowledge that I think this is really brilliant and insightful and super helpful. Just for our listeners who I thank for joining us. I mean, even if just at this point in the interview you resonate with this, that in itself is a sign that that work with Veronique could be a path forward. And part of it is a personal endorsement, certainly part of asking guests on the podcast to reflect on their work, I think requires of me a transparency to reflect on my own journey, my own work. It's sort of like authenticity is the coin of the realm and also vulnerability in an appropriate way. So if you had told me as a 15-year-old that when I was 58, I would say that what you just characterized, that kind of journeying, that kind of transformation, would be the most important thing I would do to be safe and comfortable in my own skin, to know my authentic self, to show up for myself, to show up for others, to show up for my patients, my community. I would have said, what? It's going to be about, no, this is going to be about, it would have been all in my head.
Yeah.
And so again, just briefly, but so many sort of uh, then softenings around. I think that the wheat farmers and sort of Depression era folks that were part of my dad's community in Washington, and then intense World War II hardship coming into him having a victory garden, et cetera, like and very little resource, right?
Hmm.
That informed there was a hardness to that consciousness, which was a survival necessity, and basically lift yourself up by the bootstraps, don't whine. I mean, those things were necessities, which are understandable. And any misunderstandings I had about the degree to which that persona that meant I was loved and valued or not, that was a misunderstanding. So then that became the seed of forgiveness. And then after that, I would characterize it as fractal or holographic. So my phrase has been, we believe the stories told to us by circumstance or the stories we tell ourselves. And
Right.
we do have to, be present and engage with what happened, but also realize there's a dimension of this that's sort of shocking, which is that when we reframe the narrative and then envision and understand and embody transformation, change, grace, forgiveness, radiance, buoyancy, groundedness, openness to all experience.
Hmm.
These amazing things happen, and one of the most challenging things of all is sort of, and I'd like you to comment on this, is even forgiving ourselves for a narrative that was foreshortened or contracted relative to our authenticity.
Right. Yeah. Mm. Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot coming through. So I'm thinking in this journey, right? It's like the the forgiveness piece, it's so raw. I feel it almost so like a this might feel very extreme, but in this healing journey, like I've felt, this is proverbial obviously, that I've like scraped the skin on my entire being, and then someone shows up with this industrial size hydrogen peroxide bottle from like almost like a cartoon version of a Costco and like dumps it over my entire body. And it's so painful, but it's also very therapeutic because you feel like through like those bubbles and like the sting that it's actually calcifying change. Like it's actually reorienting the skin. And so moving through that, it's trite to say at this point, but it is a nonlinear journey, you know, through the griefs and through the letting go process. And every day I feel like an emotion shows up and it connects to something. And I just want to highlight, like, doing this work, it's hard, right? Like it would be much easier to like turn on the ignorance blinders and not pour in. It's really vulnerable, but what keeps coming through is when we can actually let go of a bit of perfectionism or being right or being indignant about needing to prove that we've been wronged, or, you know, kind of like carrying around this like massive chip on our shoulder as if that like creates more like pride that you've like gone through something, like it's a rite of passage. But rather, if we could be in a true beginner's mind, right, where we do things poorly, or we mess up, we might not say the right thing, that's when we can actually peel back the layers and look at, okay, the root of this is this specific instance, right? Like it's, if you are willing, if you want to, you know, move through this with, you know, a professional that you trust, you get to the root, right? So there's that, you know, that common metaphor, right? If you went into your kitchen and the sink was overflowing and there was water all over the floor, this is very apt in functional medicine, right? It's like, do you go grab the mop and start mopping the floor? Or do you go and you turn the faucet off?
Mhm.
And so, like in this metaphor, right, it's like, where is the root coming from? Can I actually heal that version of myself? And it's not seeking out that person necessarily because we can't control how they're going to respond, but rather, you know, there's a lot to be said for being that mother or that father for yourself, or that person that was in that instance, and taking yourself through. So this is where somatic work is very healing. So it's like, maybe it's talk therapy, maybe it's turning up music so loud so that you can't be in that thought loop anymore and you just shake your body until like you can't move anymore. Or maybe it's like, I gotta go into nature and just get entranced by how the wind is moving these leaves for a few hours, and disconnect from the screen. This is why I think this medium of podcasts is so powerful, is that you can harken back to the original storytelling, the radio shows, and you can be in the imagination. Like you could, you know, take us on a walk in nature with you, and allow how these words are resonating for you personally, so that you're able and feel empowered to make shifts in your life, right? There's like this layer of hearing it. And this is why I think it's so important to continue to listen to different conversations, read the things, continue to show up, because it's always this perfect convergence of your readiness, your willingness, your ability to be in resonance with what it is that you're hearing. Because oftentimes, I remember I went to this talk with Marianne Williamson, and she started out by saying, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. Right? Oftentimes, like we know the things, but we hear it in a different way, or we're like ready to hear it in that time, and it just lands. And my hope is that we can move through what we need to move through, and that we each have the discernment to know when we're ready to step through it.
Mhm.
And stepping through it is different than distract, dull, use the substances or like whatever the addictive thing that whole we're addictive beings, right? But it's like, okay, what is it that is distracting, pacifying, and what are the practices that can actually illuminate? And I think that's like a really big fallacy is we feel something uncomfortable or we feel so many emotions bubble in and we think like I can't handle it, like I have to like somehow pacify this or like exit out of this feeling. But what if it was actually seeking to feel that in its fullness? Because when you seek to feel it in its fullness, you realize, oh, I am feeling this so deeply because I actually care so deeply, right? Like the love is that just permeating every ounce of me that, of course, I have to have these emotions this strong. Like it would be incomprehensible not to. And so I think that really helps to kind of be in that conversation is like, okay, like the antidote to judgment is compassion. And the antidote to anxiety actually isn't calm. It's trust or faith. It's really believing that through this we can move through and feel just so much more peace on the other side.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. I want people to know it's there. If they feel like they're there, then I would encourage them to keep nurturing that and expanding that. But if they're not there, to know it's there, I think is can feel hopeful to people. And be interested to hear your thought on this. One part I find difficult to characterize, but I see it all the time. The best word I can think of is like using the words holographic or fractal. And my friend Dr. Keisha Ewers has noted this as well. Isn't actually terribly helpful to people. Uh, like I guess only a minority of people's minds sort of work that way, right? But paradigms are things that people understand. If there's a business or a community and then they get a new hearth or a new house or they plant a field or something, the paradigm changes, meaning the system changes. And when the system and the circumstances change, then the person's experience changes in ways that are not or understandable until the change happens. And I have people come in and we'll talk about switching out the, Fruit Loops to chia pudding. And they'll say, that's not enough. I'm here for a full transformation and the weights and the workout and the podcast and the assignments and the testing and the free cortisol. And what I'm not able to convey very well is that the chia pudding is information. So it's a new piece of software. It's a one item uninstall, reinstall. And then 2 weeks into chia pudding, the paradigm changes
Right.
because now they have a healthy breakfast.
Yeah.
And then something new feels within reach and something falls away. And the things that you're talking about also change. Sometimes what
Mm-hmm.
happens is these doors of consciousness or willingness or readiness open
Mm-hmm.
spontaneously. And suddenly that person finally has a conversation they needed to have with somebody on their team or with themselves or a softening or
Mm-hmm.
sets a boundary or develops agency. And so I would characterize this, and I do think of, I'm not actually a huge fan of the Marvel comic universe, but I keep invoking it more than I would expect to. I think about, I think about this movie, Doctor Strange, because there's the characters and plot, you know, minute by minute, change. There's all these twisting reorientations. And so the plot is driven by the fact that there's a new circumstance or a new world or reality is twisting. And I think that that's people's functional medicine journey. And so I'm always focusing on sequencing here. I say, yeah, someday you might need to be tested for heavy metals, but right now we're starting with some of the things you're describing. You need to be in your body for something good to happen. If you're dissociated and not even present, we're going to start there. So,
Yeah.
so it's just I guess that's the one thing I would share as we keep benefiting from your expertise is just that uh, these paradigm changes are sometimes these rapid tumbling events. And so it really places a priority on working with what's in front of you, but also on knowing your journey's going to change so fast. Don't presume you know what's coming next. That's the beginner's mind part. And for anybody
Hmm.
that wants a taste of this, I would encourage them to check out kind of the work of Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell on the hero's journey, where they talk about this universal experience of sort of leaving the village, going on this wild journey, coming back to the village, and then sort of having something to share for the benefit of others. And these Jungian mythic things that we all resonate with. There's some big monster, but then when we approach the monster, it turns into a fish, and then we're swimming with the fish, and then we come up in a cave, and then we're
Hmm.
blind and we're led through the darkness. I think these are representations of these paradigm changes. So I hope people get into beginner's mind and think about doing the work you're describing, because that's where the action is.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that so much, and it's so brave to get into the beginner's mind. We get so embarrassed not to know. This is why the archetype of, a foreigner going to a land where they don't speak the language, people are like so timid to even try because they don't want to do it wrong and then look like they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, we didn't know what we were doing until we knew what we were doing. And then maybe we still don't know what we're doing, right? Like we just think that we do.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't right at all, right? So, yeah, so something that came through in my meditation this morning is like, oh, like actually, what if instead of thinking it needed to be so serious, it was turning the dial up on curiosity and creativity and play. And
Mhm.
so I think, it's so telling, right? When we think, okay, I've hit this wall and now I just want to do everything, and we can kind of like obsess about doing everything to a T, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to get my diet in order, and then I'm going to take the herbs. I'm going to like do the movement. I'm going to like, we can get like a little like type A and OCD with ourselves. And I tend to, I have that in me. So I tend to attract a lot of clients and friends who are, loving the color coded calendar and wanting to get it done. And I think what's so important on the other side, or really what's part of, it's this, the other, what's the expression, like the same side of the same side of the coin, or
Other side of the coin.
the other
Yeah.
side of the coin, yeah,
Yeah.
is what about what to eliminate, what to stop doing. So I have an autoimmune disease called vitiligo. It's one of the cosmetic ones that causes white patches on the skin, and so like the journey began of like wanting to treat it topically, right? Because it's like the brain's like, oh, like this is happening on the skin. I'm going to put like an ointment on it because that's the model that I know in the Western world. And then, if anyone listening has gone through any kind of journey of wanting to heal inflammation or any kind of autoimmune response, and really this could extend to any kind of sickness, we want to just be done with it. It's like, can I
Hmm.
just be normal? But then also we're like, but not too normal. Like I also want to be an individual and unique, you know? And so what I love about this conversation is actually the best thing is to eliminate the things that are inflammatory. And if everyone listening just took a little tour for like 7 to 30 days, and just like, I would love to hear how you feel. So it's just taking away gluten and alcohol, just two things. Sure, you could eliminate other things, but let's just go with those two things. And then really run everything through that filter, right? Because it's not just the food and the drink that are inflammatory. It might be the thought you have that's on repeat that is holding you hostage. So because we're in a matrix, oftentimes seeking to fix, you might walk into your space and be like, oh, like, when did that crack show up? Like, I better call the handyman and like, or, oh, like, my kid left their shoes in the hallway. Like, I told them a million times not to do that. And so we get hijacked in these different ways. And so, Viktor Frankl has that famous quote of allowing for that space between the stimulus and response. And so that's really much a part of the conversation of the healing journey, is allowing for space. And I would even back up more from that and just really tend to these sacred morning hours before you allow outside stimulus to hijack you. And this is so challenging in the modern world because we think that we have to be accessible, or maybe we're habituated to using our phone as our alarm, and there's different ways that we are kind of like poured into this paradigm of the scroll, or like on the emails, or let me just do one more thing. And then we're like in these false urgencies, and then we're like in these like continual flare-ups that we might not even clock as such, especially if we live in an urban environment. But I think it can be certainly prevalent no matter where we live, this idea of something happens, like we were fine, and then we might like receive an email where someone needs something right away. And what I tend to do is I kind of like bounce off of that. If someone's trying to rush me, I actually like, I slow down, right? It's like I like downshift, because it's so important that we're just really turning up our discernment on what it is that we are allowing in our field. Because when we can become more masterful at dialing our frequency in a way that feels uplifted and grounded and nurtured, and then we radiate that to all the lives that we touch. Like I can like just kind of like picture a globe, and it's like these like beams of light that shine through. And then it's like, okay, like, and that's from like not doing things. And then you can have the chia pudding. Right?
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. That is truly radiant. One of my heroes reminds me of you, David Duncan. He just wrote a book called Sun House, kind of about Eastern Western things and community. And one of the words he invokes in there is really interesting to me. He talks about apophatic learning, which is learning and growing by taking away. And I had never heard that word.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I really wanted to flag it for everybody, or highlight and underscore it, that this distinction Veronique made about, there was this intense period in the story of her family, and then this sort of salvation and movement, and then uh, like a sweetness in the moment of laughter and sharing food. This very much is an example again of something I think that can be super, super helpful, which is that we can suffer and be sad and be afraid and be joyous and be full of the sacred and grateful all at once. So I just
Yeah.
characterize this as this
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really surprised by how often people think this or. I'm either going
Mm-hmm.
to recognize the seriousness of suffering and what a close call it was, or I'm going to be sort of, uh, just happy and carefree. But I think the way we experiencing things, kind of the way we're built, I suppose, is this and it's
Mm-hmm.
all of it. And I think there's a real courage in celebrating the moment when there were close calls and terrible suffering and loss of other people, that the day the showers were working, right? I mean, it's all kind of rolling all at
Yeah.
once. I think there's a courage again in celebrating the moment because it's all ephemeral.
Right. Yeah. 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 I often want to turn the dial up on the giant cosmic giggle, right?
Hmm.
You know, and you know, to your point, yeah, this duality of I want to have the Fruit Loops because it connects me to my childhood and it's comfy, and then I get a little sugar rush and I feel happy, and then I also have this modern body that really craves the chia pudding, and so like
Hmm.
both are true.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, I think we can honor our inner child and our modern adult at the same time. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like you could create a kind of Fruit Loop vibe in your chia pudding. You know what I mean? Like you could use like beets and spirulina, you know what I mean? Like you could color it in a way that
Yeah.
would be kind of like a fun homage to
Hmm.
satisfying the inner child. Because when I get triggered, I have this archetype of the 14-year-old version of myself and the 2-year-old version of myself, where I'm like wanting to tantrum in some way. Like I want to just do what I want and like forget everything, right? Not to forgo responsibility. I've always been very loyal, almost to a fault sometimes. Like the world would have to burn down for me to miss an appointment. However, when I feel dysregulated, that's when I want the goldfish with the raisins, or I want the bread with the butter and the
Hmm.
honey.
Hmm.
But I think like it isn't to say that I don't have those things, but I have them more sparingly than I used to. And I think part of the journey of moving through it holistically is to have it and celebrate it.
Hmm.
Is because, you know, this is scientifically proven, right? It's like you can do the thing and then it's done. And then you could also then do the thing and then start to spiral on it. Then it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You're like in the shame spiral. And then you have to like tell all of your friends, like, you know, I went to the store last night and got a gallon of ice cream. And guess what? I just sat down, I ate the entire thing. You know, like we could
Hmm.
just be telling everyone that
Hmm.
story. And so a lot of this presencing practice is like, what if the meditation was to savor whatever it is that we're doing without labeling it good or bad? That sometimes we falter, sometimes we might not do it perfectly, but we're just trying our best, moment by moment, you know, and we let ourselves
Hmm.
cry and we let ourselves rage and then we come back to joy. But most of all, I think it's so important when we seek for the light when we are ready to allow it in. And it's so important. I like really, really want to emphasize this because it's so tempting to retreat and get reclusive when we're still in process, but we're all still in process. Like there's actually no point B to arrive to. And so if
Hmm.
that's true, then it's like reach out, because chances are someone you love is going through something similar, and you can be powerful mirrors for one another, and in the conversation, in the sharing space, it'll it'll shift, right? Like you'll lessen the grip on it. You'll set the things down even just for a moment. And so yeah, I think that's such an important reminder. I keep telling myself that, like, if grief shows up at my door, or all of a sudden I like feel like I'm about to have a panic attack, it's like, okay, I have to cancel all plans, and I just want to get like really small and still. And then I think, okay, like, who's a safe person? Like, where's a safe place? Like, how can I connect to my breath and like something that feels nourishing, not to escape, but to like process with. And so I think
Hmm.
that's a really important distinction, to just
Mm.
to be in the curiosity about.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Just totally awesome.
Yeah, just do
Yeah.
that. And that's it.
Mm,
Yeah. And then find sweet souls that you can laugh with, like full
hmm.
belly laughs.
Hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
easy to get very serious with this.
Hmm.
And it's also really hysterical.
Hmm. Yeah. My grandfather was a really interesting guy. He was in Helena, Montana. He was a general practitioner and a general surgeon when you could do both. In the era, you could do both.
Mm,
And one of his maxims was don't take yourself too seriously,
that's it.
which is
Hmm.
also kind of a this and thing, uh, because there's lots of serious things we deal with and they feel serious, and responsibility is
Oh,
a
certainly.
serious thing. So it's
Hmm.
very, but then my mother, who's also one of my heroes, and my dad's one of my heroes too. I mean, I don't want to mischaracterize any of this stuff. Uh, uh, but then my mother, got his sense of humor, and then sort of her hallmark. She's kind of one of these people that's sort of born a Zen master, right? Just didn't
Hmm.
have to read or didn't just manifest that. But but her sense of humor is just her point is if you don't have a sense of humor, there is no point.
Yeah.
So I kind of flashed on that while you were talking. Anything you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
Mm. One of my big mantras is do the moves that move you. So stop shitting yourself, right?
Hmm.
There's like, so many places that you can find someone's like, oh, you have to do this. Like you could fill your house with all the, sauna, ice plunge, Theragun, like you could be sort of pouring into doing all the things. Like my doctor said I should do cardio, I should do weight training, I should. I think connecting like hand to heart, like what is the energetic intention? What is your soul's desire, essence? Like what connects you to purpose? And then it's like, okay, what are the moves that connect you to that essence? Is it dancing? Is it yoga? Do you like tennis? Are you wanting to go on nature walks? And do that. I
Hmm.
think it's like let go of the hardship of needing to do the things that feel like they're put upon you, and and
Hmm.
and really tap into and the movement in all the senses, right? So it's like the physical movement but also the emotional and the spiritual. So sometimes my practice, people ask me all the time, like, what do you do? It's gone from, like hot power yoga where I felt like if I could wear my clothes again, I like didn't do it well enough. Like I wanted to sweat my face off. And sometimes I still do, but most of the time it's very gentle. It's slow walks with coffee in hand. It's just, I mean, this morning just like I had to stop looking at that moon, just like was like this beam, full, beautiful moon. And it's like, that's so magnificent. Like what we get to witness when we slow down, feet to the ground, like in the slowing down. And so there's a lot to be in wonderment about, a lot to be in awe of.
Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you, Rob. Really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you.
Where can people find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, I'd love that. So I would love to continue the conversation. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Veronique Ory. And you can learn about my offerings on my website, yogawithveronique.com. I have a book that I publish. It's available on Amazon, and you can get the hard copy. It's like a coffee table style book of stories and photographs, and there's an interactive piece of guided meditation and yoga practices, and they're just 20 minutes long, which has been scientifically proven to completely change your physiology, just to allow these little practices to highlight a certain uplift in your days. And now it's a global community called Shine, and the Shine, like we've been talking about, it's not like just be happy and radiate and frolic through the field of sunflowers, although happy to do that too. I think of these pains and these traumas that we hold. They create like these like fractures on the heart, and oftentimes it's like in that vulnerability and like through the pain, like that's how the light emerges. And it's actually like through that tenderness that we're able to more deeply connect with one another. So if that resonates with you, if you've been craving a community of like-hearted souls to journey through practices together, and there's a community aspect of it where you can, whether video or phone, do the practices with your chosen community, or you can come in and join people in our community. I mean, we're all part of the same community anyway, and be a part of that conversation. There's a 7-day free trial. We'd love to have you come in and join. And if your heart's been beckoning travel and wanting to practice a different language, I'll be going to Italy with my dear friend Erin. We host annual retreats, and we'll be on the east coast of Italy next October 24th to the 31st. And we have a few spots open if you've been craving movement in all the ways. It's a pretty powerful way to tap in, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Terrific. The contact information will be in the show notes. Thanks for your time, your wisdom. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for shining.
Thank you, Rob. You too.
Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.